I like the Romulans. They're a fun alien species to explore, and their look, themes and potential as both allies and enemies is fun to play around with in the universe of Star Trek. So for this video, I thought I would just explore the common interiors of a Romulan vessel and compare it to your standard Federation starship, because there are a number of interesting features. For a start, the layout of the Romulan bridge actually changed over time, with the familiar central chair form being adopted, possibly from the Klingon Empire or even Starfleet. In fact, from as early as the 22nd century until at least the Termed incident, many ships operate around a central pillar formation that was more like a command centre than a forwards-facing bridge. We can see this with both the Romulan warbird of the 23rd century and even earlier with the layout of the control rooms for the hollow projector vessel from Enterprise. These layouts had the crew working around a central control terminal, while external consoles around the edge of the room provided more access points. The captain was free to walk around the entire bridge and observe. These sorts of central control tables were in use as late as the 2360s, although by this time they'd switched over to a more traditional captain's chair and forwards-facing consoles. The captain of a Romulan D'Deridex class had a ready room to the side, which could function as a backup command centre, allowing for them to lock out the bridge and grant command overrides from this location. The captain's chair also had the ability to intercept and override any action from any bridge station. The reason for this switch is probably the same reason Starfleet uses it, that from the central position the captain can view each console. In the older formations, it would be easier on larger craft for a crewman to hide their actions and inputs from a commanding officer, for whatever reason. Which brings me to a nice segue about Romulan controls. The Romulan sense of secrecy and duplicity is built into their culture from a base level, and even in the most unexpected ways. So standard Starfleet ships have a setting that detects your biometrics and logs you into your console, loading up your specific layout and preferences. Additional things like security passwords may be required, and locked out to non-crew. But that's nothing compared to the security of a Romulan vessel. Upon arriving at the console, the same login applies. However, additional security measures are required and hidden, like inputting a passcode with no obvious entry. Or more commonly, the initial display you are presented with is a facsimile that allows one to interact but not alter the ship's abilities. This means that an intruder who thinks they have access is in effect playing with the controller unplugged. In addition to this, ghost programs are commonly installed on Romulan ships, things that can establish dedicated communication links to secure channels and databases of otherwise covered up information. This file's access is usually restricted to voice authorization and a code phrase, as well as a direct request to the file's location, which is not discoverable otherwise. You're never going to find the folder by browsing through the ship's computers unless you specify exactly where it is beforehand. Not every turbolift on the ship would access the bridge or engine room, with only certain passages leading to it. This is another security measure, and most Romulan vessels involved numerous hidden passages and false corridors that led nowhere. Of course, this ate into available deck space, which is why it likely only applied to larger vessels like the D'Deridex and Mogai. There are false panels in most quarters, allowing for hiding spots, and some rooms cannot be accessed at all without knowing the location of a door disguised as a segment of wall. It's common for many Romulans to have their own anti-surveillance devices, which are of course frowned upon, and therefore hidden too, with a common end-of-shift act to scan your room for bugs. One interesting thing about Romulan vessels is that their computer cores were severely limited in terms of creativity, and were restrained from developing into true artificial intelligence. Not only is this because of the mythological distrust of AI and their culture, but what use would a Romulan paranoia have for a ship that might question its orders and think for itself? However, Romulan algorithms and processing power were still incredibly advanced, allowing for their multitude of code breaking, data analysis and tactical assessment abilities. Honestly, this might be a better approach, with the accidental invention of intelligence seemingly a common thing on Federation technology. Each vessel had a Tau Shi'ar contact aboard it too that was there to watch the ship and crew, collect information and answer to their superiors in the organisation. Their presence often brought tension aboard, but several ships also had a hidden agent whose identity was not known. When it comes to the actual design of a ship's corridors and rooms, the Romulans prioritised browns, greys and greens as their colours. Not necessarily a darker look to their ships, the green metal was always there to relate to the Star Empire's heraldry being drawn from the Raptor. Designs often include Raptor wings and motifs, often very stylised to the point of being unrecognisable. Doors in the vessel are often arched and less squared off than Starfleet, while there were less chairs than a Federation vessel. The Scimitar had a very unique layout for a bridge and design, however it seems this was designed with Remans in mind more so than Romulan crews, so we cannot take most of what we see here as guaranteed, as they have better low-light vision and a more utilitarian and pragmatic view of things. The Narada is technically another Romulan vessel, but it's not a part of the military, and according to the non-canon lore, it was also extensively modified with Borg tech derived from the Vault. So like the Scimitar, we cannot use it as an example. I want to bring up the Romulan Singularity core room here, but the only one we see in canon is a small console built into a back wall, which is rather underwhelming when compared to the grandeur of a warp core. Other media like Star Trek Online really expands the technology to resemble something more expected, a rotating field around an encapsulated singularity which is suspended over a pit. Naturally, a lot of this varies from ship to ship, and even class of vessel. The smaller ships cannot really make use of false corridors and a multitude of fake walls. But on top of this, if every massive D'Deridex had the same secrets built in, then they'd stop being secrets pretty quickly. Serving aboard a Romulan vessel is likely to come with a series of pitfalls for one not versed in their culture and training, which is kind of the point. You could not even utilise a panel in a corridor for directions without it downright lying to you, unless you know exactly which button to push to open the real overlay. Logging into your workstation, however, is more personalised with access input that only you and your superior officers can know. Anyone else might just end up triggering an alert or end up literally doing nothing but pushing false buttons. On top of this, there is always the chance that some hidden directive or order will counter your clearance for some reason. You're always being monitored, and even the privacy of your own quarters is not to be taken for granted. All these security measures are deliberately challenging features to keep you on the lookout for deception, to practice your skills as a Romulan officer, but despite all of this, they value efficiency highly. This means that there is a delicate balance between all this culturally accepted testing of mental acuity and actually running the ship. Loyalty and a measure of trust are required, and there is a line to be found between these small hurdles and actual distrust. It's more or less the equivalent of saying, just keeping you on your toes. So, thanks for listening to me talking on the Romulans and gushing about their ships for a little more. I'll take any excuse. I've been Rick, and until the next one, Jolan True.